Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for today's episode. It's a good one and it's based off of previous episodes that I've done and questions that I've gotten from you guys who want more detail when it comes to choosing between lead and tungsten weights. In the past, I've done videos on shaky heads and jigs and when I prefer to throw a lead head versus a tungsten head. And, because of that, I've gotten a lot of questions from you guys regarding Texas rigs. When you're throwing a bullet weight or a flipping style weight, should you choose lead or tungsten when Texas rigging? And that's a really good question out there because, as you know, if you've watched my previous videos, I'm not all about tungsten. I think there's very, very good applications for tungsten, but there's a lot of times we don't need to throw tungsten or spend the additional money on tungsten. And I got to tell you guys, I am very particular when it comes to Texas rigging. And I do have a very, very much a favorite regarding Texas rigs. But before I get into it, I do want to remind you guys that if you're looking to buy some weights or tackle, check out the description in the video. Go to therealshot.com, do your purchasing of tackle and outdoor gear and hunting gear there. If you use the discount code Stefan10, you'll get 10% off your order and you help the channel out. So guys, if you're looking for some tackle, head over to the realshot.com website and do your shopping over there. They've got plenty of tungsten weights, I can tell you that. And that leads me into the answer. I've gotten a ton of questions regarding Texas rigs and the weight choice. And I have to tell you guys, with the jigs and shaky heads, I've talked about how, for me, really the only time I want to throw tungsten over lead is if I'm fishing around rock. And the main reason for that is I like the sound of tungsten on rock versus lead. Tungsten will give out a higher pitched tone versus the duller thud of a lead head. But when it comes to Texas rigging, I'm pretty much the complete opposite. I really, really, really prefer throwing tungsten over lead. And there's a few reasons for that. First, and most obvious, has to do with the size. This is a 1/2 ounce tungsten head. It's going to be roughly 70% smaller than the same 1/2 ounce lead jig head. That's a pretty big difference, especially when you're starting to talk about weights of a 1/2 ounce or higher. If you're talking about pitching a 2 ounce tungsten weight, can you imagine how big that lead head would be if you were throwing 2 ounce lead? It really just becomes an issue for me where if I'm throwing a Texas rig, I want a smaller weight coming through that fish's mouth. So when I go to set the hook, I usually set the hook pretty hard when I'm Texas rigging because I want to get that hook through the plastic and drive it home into the fish. I'm also generally going to be fishing closer to the fish. A lot of my Texas rigging is done, I'm pitching or I'm flipping to isolated cover or laydowns. And I'm really not that far away. I'm not making a super long cast. So because of that, even if you think that you're slowing down your hook set or not setting the hook as hard, you still have a lot less stretch in your line, which is creating a stronger hook set. And when that happens, I want a smaller weight to come through that fish's mouth. If you have a big weight and you set too hard, what can happen is you'll explode that fish's mouth open and the whole bait will come right out and you don't get a hook into him. The less size that you have to pull through the lips of the fish will mean that you have less chance of blowing the mouth open. So I prefer tungsten for that reason because I have greater hookups because it's a smaller sized weight coming through the fish's mouth. It really, really makes a very big difference. That's the number one reason. Second reason has to do with the way I'm fishing it. Like I said, generally speaking, I'm going to be fishing cover of some form when I'm throwing a Texas rig. So if I'm throwing into a tree or I'm throwing into a grass clump or I'm throwing into, around a dock, I get much better sensitivity out of the tungsten. And I want to have that sensitivity Not necessarily because I need to know what I'm fishing. Generally, I'm going to know that I'm fishing a log or a dock or pad stems, whatever it is. I want to have that feel so that I can A, feel the bites better, but B, and more importantly, I know where my bait is at, which is going to limit me from getting hung up and snagged in that laydown or on that dock post. If you're using lead, you have less sensitivity, and therefore you may not know that your bait is hitting a fish's mouth or in a fish's mouth versus hitting the log. Or you may not know that you're sitting on the dock post as easily as you would with tungsten. So again, it's more about uh, feeling the fish's bites and as well not getting hung up as much. So there's definite advantages of tungsten over lead in that scenario. The last the last like time or the third time that I'm throwing a Texas rig is generally going to be casting. So I might be casting a Texas rig, say creature bait to some grass or to a shell bar or on a ledge, something along those lines. And again, in those scenarios, I want to have better feel of whatever I'm fishing. So if I'm casting to a brush pile, I want to know that I'm in the brush pile. You'll get that better sensitivity. So on a long cast, I want that sensitivity. And then at the same time, if I'm setting the hook at the end of my cast on a long cast in a brush pile or on a little rock pile, I want that smaller weight to come through the fish's mouth better, which will allow me to get better hook sets on those casts that are way out there. Again, that's one of the biggest errors a lot of people make. I'm very much a proponent of making long casts because I think you get more bites because there's less chance that those fish are going to be skittish. But having said that, if you're not using the right rod and you're not using the right line, a lot of times you'll lose more fish because you never actually drove the hook home on that long cast. So anything that I can do to increase my odds of getting a hook penetrated into that fish's mouth is going to be something that I want to concentrate on. And using a tungsten weight on a long cast is easier to get through the fish's mouth, comes through the mouth easier, which allows you to get the hook into the jaws of that fish better than if you had trouble getting a bigger weight through the fish's mouth. So there's a lot of benefits when it comes to Texas rigging with a tungsten weight. I really do not think you're putting yourself at a better advantage in any situation if you're using a lead bullet weight. So guys, when you're Texas rigging, I highly recommend going with a tungsten weight. I think it's going to increase your hookups. It's going to increase your ability to identify bites. It's going to prevent you from getting stuck quite as much, and it's just going to increase your overall productivity on the water. And if you watched my previous videos talking about tungsten jigs or tungsten shaky heads, I'm not a huge proponent of it in those circumstances. So I'm not an all tungsten guy, but when it comes to bullet weights and Texas rigging, I think it's to your advantage. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, hit that like button, guys, and stay tuned for tomorrow's video.